Hi, this is David Schmidt with ESFI, and here with me is Wolf from the GSL. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit about this season of Code A and GSTL? Has there been anything that has stood out to you or been distinctive this season?
Well, the level is rising quite a bit. We've had a few teams that have done really well in the past, like Slayers, for example, do really poorly. They seem to be a team that's kind of shaky right now. You see that Fnatic looked a little bit less solid this season than they did last season. The roster thinned out a little bit. You look at NSHoSo, for example, they have a really thin roster right now, barely able to hang on at all in the GSTL. Who knows if they'll even be in next season. A lot of people worried about that team collapsing. Then you have in Code A, now we have KeSPA players in there. The level of Code A is rising so significantly because the player pool right now is just so stacked. I mean, I like to call it the GSL player pool, basically 60 to 80 players who've been in the GSL multiple times, or they play in GSTL really often. And this pool of players, their level has just rise so much. You very rarely have players anymore who are kind of one-hit wonders, or players like Ergendal or something who just get in through Code A with a lucky bracket. Or you have players like Holland who get kind of a lucky bracket. They just do Void Rail, ends up losing the first round. Those type of players basically have all but disappeared. So I think the level is rising quite significantly. This season has just started. We already lost Jockji. He's out of the GSL. So that's something that's a little bit sad for a lot of fans. And that's another reason why NSHoSo is looking really weak right now, is their only player in the GSL is already out in the first round. It just goes to show that a champion can fall all the way out if they don't have the right practice setup. So it's been a pretty interesting season so far.
You and Caldor seem to have a style where you have just a lot of fun, you love joking around, and with that you kind of bring the audience into that. And if you guys are having a good time, then the audience will. Am I reading it right? Is that your kind of your style?
Yeah, I would say that I think it's really important to entertain all demographics and all viewers, and I think that sometimes there's a lot of downtime in StarCraft. And during these times, it's fun to make jokes or to talk about some personal experience, or even to talk about what the players said to us earlier that day, that morning, or something that happened to us that day, because we want to bring the viewers into us, feel like they're connected with us, they feel somewhat personally. Not very connected, not super personally, but just let them know our personalities so they can really connect with what we say. Even how we commentate the games, our personalities come out a little bit. So I think it's good to connect with the viewers that way. Entertain them in all ways, not just about StarCraft, but if there's some boring part of the game, I don't want the viewer to be bored. I don't want a newer player who doesn't know that much about the games to sit there and listen to what it means to build your command center on the high ground versus the low ground if they don't even know what a command center can do, can it transform into an orbital or not. So we have to balance, of course, talking to newer players, talking to experienced veterans, and just making jokes and being funny, because right now in StarCraft 2, that's a kind of a casting style that's kind of permeated through the entire scene. It's just to be not comical, but to be entertaining.
Excellent. And we're seeing a couple maps this season that are new. We have Abyssal City, we have Grand Lagoon. How do you think those maps are working out, and what do you think of the map pool in general?
I think those maps are pretty cool. They're looking really interesting so far. We haven't seen too many games on them just yet, but I think something to note about these newer maps, they're getting a lot bigger, and that's a big concern of mine. You have maps like Whirlwind, you have Atlantis Spaceship, even Tal'Darim Ultra was a big map in the past. Now these new underwater maps are really huge, and even if they're two-player maps, these new bigger maps just limit a lot of the strategies. Yeah, you can still 2-Rax proxy, but can you 2-gate proxy? Can you do a fast 2-Rax push? Some of these strategies some people really dislike, but I think that it made the StarCraft 2 so much more dynamic. I was watching some old VODs recently, and I remember watching a game on Delta Quadrant with someone proxy, and I was like, what? That map was way too small, but I think a balance can be had here, and I think the way that map makers are pushing towards these bigger maps makes for longer, not more boring games, but there's less strategies that can be used. So that's something I'm kind of concerned about right now, and I hope that more medium-sized maps start to come out in the future.
So that a map pool has a mixture of games for different strategies through a series?
I just want them to be like, I want earlier strategies to be just as viable as they once were. Not too strong, but viable, and I feel like right now some of these strategies are starting to disappear.
Great. A lot of the non-KeSPA players, ESF or others, have talked about this burden or pressure they face when they go against KeSPA players because of the history there, and as well as kind of the expectations that these KeSPA players have only been playing StarCraft 2 for a couple months now. They're not supposed to be beating the players who've been playing for 2 years or more. Do you think that pressure, now that we're a couple months in, has dissipated a little bit, or is it still there?
I would say that sometimes these players, there was a few firsts. Like, who's going to be the first player to lose to a KeSPA player? Who's going to be the strongest player to lose to a KeSPA player? Which Code S players going to lose to a KeSPA player? Those types of stressful situations kind of dissipated. They've gone away. It's no longer, wow, we should be able to beat them no matter what. Now it's, we've got to keep beating them in the future, and all the teams are really gearing up for that. Slayers is, for example, really talked about this quite often in interviews, saying they're really trying to gear up and get their players ready to play against KeSPA players because they're getting so much stronger, and the practice regime is very different. And, you know, you have to leap from the foreign scene to the Korean scene, but within the Korean scene you have the ESF versus KeSPA. KeSPA players play so much more because if they don't, oftentimes they get kicked out of the house. You know, if they're not playing well, they may not get picked to play in the team league, for example. So this sort of pressure is very high for KeSPA players. And for ESF, I feel like it's a little bit more relaxed right now. So the ESF teams are trying to gear up to go up to KeSPA's practice level so they can really compete with them on the highest level and continue to do so. Because right now you have players like Rain really sticking out from KeSPA, but it's not like KeSPA players have already taken over GSL, but it's like you've got to keep this gap there, and if you don't continue to train as hard as they will close that gap.
When you talk about gearing up, does that mean a more structured practice schedule, more time?
More structure, more time. I feel like in KeSPA houses they just do spend more time in general, and it is more structured. They have real official coaches, not coaches who are called the coach, who appear at the house sometimes and check on people's replays occasionally, or just make the schedule. You have hired coaches who are paid to watch them day in, day out, and study specific players, specific matchups. You have just more professional coaches. You have someone like Boxer, who's so good at this, and he's so known for this, and he moves to SKT as an official coach. That kind of thing I think needs to happen more and more in ESF teams, and in foreign teams as well.
For foreigners keeping up, we've seen Artosis recently say that foreigners, they really need to be in Korea if they want to keep up. Do you agree? Do they just need to have Korean practice kind of standard, or do they have to be here?
I agree to a certain extent, but I think that there are people who can make it work. For example, Stefano has succeeded so much outside of Korea without really being here and training here. I think he has the right mind, and the state of mind is the problem that the foreign teams just don't have right now. They're not training as hard. Yeah, they're not spending as much hours, but to spend more hours, are you just going to suddenly be able to do that? No, you have to train your mind. You have to get motivated and focus. I feel like motivation is a big problem for some of these players. For example, some foreign players are becoming casters, coaches, retiring because they know that there's more money in other things for them, and they're not going to be able to get that money right away. I feel like if they get motivated to be on top, and if they do come out here to Korea, then they can train better. If they come out here and see what it's like to be a Korean player and train in a Korean house, I feel like that motivation will actually just increase. It'll rise. Because if you don't really see or know, all you do is hear about how much players play, you go home and play, it's not the same thing. You have to have a team environment, you have to have those hours, but they have to be structured properly. You have to have a coach, you have to have someone watching you. You can't motivate yourself alone.
With part of the Swarm coming out, one of the features is going to be ability to resume from replay, and the impact that could have on practicing, where you could set up a certain a 10-minute all-in and practice it from the 10-minute mark on in terms of defending it or other strategies. How do you think that will change the way people practice? Will it, and should it?
Absolutely it will, and I think it should, and I'm so excited about this myself even. Imagine if you had a replay of a pro game where you think the pro gamer who lost could have won, and you think about the different scenarios that this could happen. Even a player who's playing in a tournament, an online tournament, could watch his replay and say, could I have won that? Could I have won that battle? Go and replay it, try to micro a little bit better, or try to approach from a different angle, or be a little bit safer and win that battle. But also, like you said, you can practice against all-ins. You can have a replay where someone does a perfect 2-rax proxy that's unscouted. How do you respond? Where do you make your spine crawler? Do you need the spine crawler? How do you micro your drones? To practice with somebody, you're never going to get that perfect 2-rax proxy every time. Sometimes they're going to mess it up. Sometimes you scout it a little bit differently. But if you always have this blind replay to just work on, you just go. All right, now I see the first group of SCVs being pulled with my Overlord. Now I have to react. If you can repeatedly do this, the practice can be so much better, and it's so much easier. And I think some people argue, oh, it's going to be easier. I don't like that. I think it messes up the skill ceiling, quote unquote. But I think this is actually going to make players be able to utilize this new skill in a way that can make the skill ceiling even higher.
With the kind of the structure and dedication of the Korean teams, it seems like they're the ones most likely to embrace this new feature and use it. Do you think that'll be the case? And do you think, or is it just going to be something universally used?
I think it'll be universally used. You have players like QXC who try to make maps like this on their own, and actually people have used this The Marine Split Challenge map is really highly used in Korea, though Korean players really do embrace these types of utilities that they can use to improve their micro, improve their macro. So I think globally they'll be used.
Excellent. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing your next cast.
Thank you.